And you're live, Chair.
Thank you, John. I'll just get rid of that. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this consultative meeting of the Corporate Governance and Audit Committee. My name is Councillor Camilla Maxood and I'll be chairing today's meeting. This meeting is taking place as a remote consultative meeting in light of the current guidance in respect of the COVID-19 pandemic. In the interest of transparency and openness, the meeting has been publicised in the usual way with the agenda and report pack available online, and the meeting is being live streamed on the City Council's website so that the public can observe the meeting without needing to be present. As a remote meeting, the meeting will be consultative only and is not legally able to take any formal decisions. Any recommendations made by the committee will therefore be referred to the next physical meeting of the committee for approval. Before we begin, I will ask those present to introduce themselves. Firstly, the members of the committee, please. Councillor Almas.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. It's Councillor Gore Almas from Beeston and Holbeck Ward. Thank you.
Councillor Bentley.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jonathan Bentley, I'm Councillor for Wheatwood.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Hi, everybody. Mike Foster, I'm a councillor for Ardsley and Robin Hood.
Thank you. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, everybody. Councillor Pauline Graham, Crossgates and Winmore Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Illingworth.
Yes, Councillor John Illingworth, Chair. Councillor for Kirkstall Ward.
Welcome. Councillor Schmelt.
Hello, it's Jackie Shemilt, Councillor for Horsforth Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Truswell.
Good afternoon, everybody. Paul Truswell, Councillor for Middleton and Belleye.
Thank you. Linda.
Good afternoon, everybody. Linda Wild, Independent Member.
Thank you, Linda. And the officers, we'll start with Kate.
Hello, I'm Kate Sadler and I'm the lead officer to the committee.
Louise Booth.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Louise Booth. I'm the head of audit for Leeds City Council.
Jonathan.
Jonathan Foster, Senior Audit Manager.
Thank you. Louise Ivans.
Thank you, Chair. Louise Ivans, Principal Audit Manager.
Victoria.
Hello, everyone. I'm Victoria Bradshaw. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Council.
Hi, Victoria. Richard.
I don't think we've got Richard on the call today, Chair.
Okay, and we've got Mary.
Mary Hasnip, Head of Finance in Corporate Financial Management.
Thank you, Mary. Louise Whitworth.
Thank you, Chair. Louise Whitworth, Head of Information Governance and Cyber and Data Protection Officer for the Council.
Thank you. Rebecca.
Afternoon, Chair. Afternoon, everybody. Yes, Rebecca Roberts, Legal Officer.
Tim Rollett.
Good afternoon, everybody. Tim Rollett from the Council's Intelligence and Policy Service.
And finally, Emma.
Good afternoon, everyone. Emma Camillo Price, also Intelligence and Policy Service.
Thank you. And then our external auditors, Gareth.
Good afternoon, Chair. Afternoon, everybody. Gareth Mills, Engagement Lead from Grant Thornton, the external auditors to the Council.
And Paminda.
Good afternoon, everybody. Paminda Sethi, Grant Thornton, external auditors.
Thank you. And finally, we are joined in the meeting by Gillian Campbell and Duncan Black from Glasgow City Council. Welcome, Gillian and Duncan.
Hey there.
Hello, thanks very much.
Moving to the agenda, item number 1.
Thank you, Chair. Under agenda item number 1, declarations of interest. Could I ask members if they've got any declarations of interest?
No, none.
I see no indications. I'll assume that's none. Item number 2, apologies for absence. Just the one apology, Chair, and that's from Councillor Peter Howard.
Thank you, John. We'll move to item number 3, public sector internal audit standards, external quality assessment, and I invite Louise Booth to introduce this item, please?
Thank you, Chair. As you'll be aware, we've had a recent external assessment by our lovely colleagues from Glasgow, and they've very kindly accepted our invitation to present the report to you all today. I'd really like to thank the colleagues from Glasgow. It's been a very interesting and informative experience, and also to the colleagues and members of the committee that also participated in the exercise. Thank you very much. So over to you, Duncan.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'll just obviously the report's in front of you. I'll take it as read, but I would like to just talk through it because it's an important document for the committee as it speaks to the reliance you can place on your internal audit function. So just briefly then, in terms of background, the public sector internal audit standards require internal audit service to be reviewed each year via a self-assessment and every 5 years in an external quality assessment, an EQA. So we conducted your EQA between roughly September and November this year. And the approach taken was the same as the last time you had an EQA 5 years ago, and that was via the Core Cities network. So basically, each member of the Core Cities group were allocated another authority to review, avoiding any authorities reviewing each other in order to avoid any potential conflict. And the approach that was agreed by the Core Cities network was in the form of a validated self-assessment. So what that means is that your internal audit team provided us with an updated self-assessment of themselves against the standards, and then we effectively then checked that using sampling methods just against supporting evidence and other documentation that we could find. So we verified that self-assessment. And then in addition to that, we interviewed a number of key stakeholders, yourself, Chair, also the previous Chair, recognising there'd been a recent turnover, and also key officers from the executive and some other parts of the council. And then the final part of it was we issued a survey to a number of other council officers just to get some wider feedback on the service that you received from internal audit. So in terms of our findings in the report, so the main conclusion is that your internal audit service in Leeds conforms with the public sector audit standards. So that's the main message I need to tell you today. All the technical points that we're looking for in terms of audit planning, field work, and reporting, etc., all look absolutely fine to us. But more than that, we've noted in our opinion that the function is highly regarded and well positioned within the organisation. One of the more important aspects of the review is to get a sense of how audit is positioned, how it's viewed by senior management and elected members. Is it valued as a professional independent function that can be trusted to get involved in assessing risk and investigating issues and supporting the business? And based on our work, we can confirm this is definitely the case. So it's a very positive report, Chair. I suppose, as you may be aware, auditors tend to get a bit of a nosebleed if we issue a report with no recommendations. So we've made 3 minor recommendations to your internal audit team, and that's set out in the action plan. I won't go through them. I hope they're self-explanatory, but they are minor recommendations. So it's overall a very positive reflection on the internal audit service that you received, Chair. And I hope you find the paper useful and over the next few years as you receive work from the team. And then finally, I would like to thank Louise and her team and all the people we spoke to. It's been a very easy process and a joy to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan. Before I invite members for questions, can I thank you and Gillian and your team for the work that you undertook? It's much appreciated. Thank you very much. Okay, and then we've got questions from members. Councillor Foster first, and then Councillor Truswell.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chair. Duncan, you mentioned the interviews, the 5 interviews, and I think it was 10 questionnaires that were issued out. But in your report, in Appendix 2, you explained that only half of those questionnaires were returned. Could you explain, which 5 questionnaires weren't completed, and how does that impact on the accuracy of your audit?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so That was obviously a part of our review that, as I said in my introduction, that we felt was worthwhile, was issuing a questionnaire to certain officers across the council. And I don't have the exact responses to hand. I'm not sure if we have that to hand, Gillian. I'm not sure if we do. But in terms of how that affects our opinion, as I said in my introduction, the key part is the technical compliance of the standards. And that was really through our validation of the self-assessment and the supporting evidence that was provided. So that's probably the most important thing. The kind of softer aspect, if I can call it that, is getting feedback from stakeholders and others to make sure that we're not missing anything through that pure self-assessment process, that kind of technical review. So I'm happy that the return rate of 50% isn't impacting on that overall conclusion. Obviously, we'd like to have been higher. I know that we did chase people once or twice to try and make that happen, but equally had to draw a line somewhere and write our report up. I think the other thing I'd say is that those questionnaires, it's not really a sampling approach. It's not a statistical analysis of returns. It's really just to get some qualitative feedback from people. And I suppose the assumption is if there was any burning issues that somebody had, they would have taken the opportunity to complete that questionnaire. So yes, I agree. It would have been better to have a full return, but in my view, it doesn't affect our overall conclusion.
Councillor Foster, would you
Just
like to
follow
come
that one
back?
up.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be good because I mean, the 10 people that received the questionnaires were all senior members of the council. I'm quite astonished actually that 5 of them felt that they didn't need to reply. Have we got some recourse on that to challenge the 5 that didn't complete the questionnaire? You know, it's suspicious when you do an audit and 5 senior members of the council fail to respond to a questionnaire of this type.
Chair, do you want me to come back in that? Or?
Yes, please. Sorry, Duncan.
I mean, I suppose it's really up for officers of the council to take that up and to feed that back, I suppose that disappointment back to the relevant people. What we'll do is Gillian or myself will feed that back through Louise Booth just to give her the details of who did and didn't reply, and maybe that message could be communicated back to those officers that this committee is given. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that, Duncan. If you want to pass the names to me, and I'll work with colleagues to try and get the information. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foster, would you like to come back?
No, it's okay. I'm happy with that.
Councillor Truswell?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And before asking my question, I'd just like to support what Councillor Foster said. It has been a continual refrain of this committee that we should get a full return of responses to requests from audit, and that's for internal audit reports, of course, but it would only be consistent that we should apply that to this external audit that we've undertaken. I think my question relates to the second recommendation, Duncan, that's made in your report, where it says consideration should be given to including reference to internal audit work being undertaken in compliance with the PSIAS in all assurance reports. Now, as the response rightly says, we do receive audit reports, and we do, as a committee, make observations and ask for further information. But could I ask you, in terms of this recommendation, what specifically triggered it? What shortcoming, albeit minor, in the current way we operate led to you making this recommendation?
Thanks. Chair, the honest answer is this came to light as part of our own EQA 5 years ago when Manchester came to review us, and they pointed out that it's benefit. I can't remember if it's part of the standards themselves, Gillian, or they are, you're nodding. Yeah, so it is part of the standards. But also, I think just it makes sense to be clear when internal audit is reporting on something that it's done in accordance with the public sector standards. It forces the auditors to be explicit about that, and it gives the audience that assurance that that is the case. I think it also sometimes internal auditors can be asked to do work out with their core duty as internal audit, and they may occasionally find themselves reporting on things that aren't done within the realm of public sector audit standards, and therefore by explicitly saying that work you're reading is done in that way, then it's just being clear about what is and what isn't within that scope. Hope that makes sense.
It does. Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you, Paul. Further question? No? Any further questions from any members? Councillor Illingworth, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, that's
There you
right.
go.
I've just been clicking on my thing. Yes, I share Mike Foster's concerns about this, but I'm also curious to know what's happened to the appendices in this report, because I don't have them. And I now realise that they're quite important documents. And I'm a bit baffled by that, actually. I was hoping you could enlighten me.
Councillor Illingworth, are you working from the paper agenda that was issued?
Yes, I am.
Right, at the point where the paper agenda was originally issued, the report, which is the appendix, hadn't yet been signed off and cleared for release. So that was issued as a late document and would have come out to you separately. But in the intervening period, there was the decision to take the meeting as a remote consultative meeting, and the agenda wasn't reissued as a paper agenda. So it's there in your digital pack that the link was emailed to you on.
Well, I've missed out on this information, so I've been trying to make sense of the document without the appendix, which doesn't really make much sense at all to me. But I understand what's happened, and I accept that it must be a large part to blame for the situation, but it is not satisfactory to be reading papers and then discover that there are bits missing from them. It rather impedes the questioning that I was hoping to put. I wonder if we might return to this at some stage later on. I've had a chance to read the appendix, because it may be that the questions I'm curious about are all answered there. I just don't know at the moment.
Okay, John, we'll see if we can come back to you, John.
Well, I'll see if I can locate the piece of paper. I have all the papers. Well, I thought I had all the papers with me. I'll just have a little scout around to see where it might have fallen out of the envelope. Or
okay, while you're doing that, I think Linda has a question. Is that right, Linda?
It is, thank you. I eventually worked out how to raise my hand. I do apologise. I was waving because I couldn't find the digital hand. Thank you. First of all, I think it's a great report, and it's all, you know, as being a head of internal audit myself, it's really pleasing to receive such a positive report. So well done to the internal audit team from me. And I think it's great that, you know, the actions are so relatively minor in the grand scheme of things. So that's great. There is one point made on page 14, another very minor point, but doesn't find its way into an action, and that's reference to the council officers being very busy and resources in departments reducing, and a potential risk that the capacity for responding to audit may be reduced. Now, I'm putting 2 and 2 together and perhaps might be getting 5 when I read that paragraph and see the 50% return in responses to the survey. Make of that what you will. But my question really is to Louise and the team. You know, what is the internal audit team doing in response to that, and to prevent that challenge coming into fruition, if you like, and providing assurance to us really that any future work that internal audit does isn't going to be limited by that potential response or lack of response from departments. So it's about how proactive is internal audit being to prevent that risk coming to fruition. Thank you.
Chair, shall I answer that?
If you don't mind, yes, Louise.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you for that question, Linda. It is something that is on our radar. We are developing our liaison with the directorates. We are trying to get in there early and anticipating any bottlenecks, for example. So we are planning the whole work for the year in advance and liaising regularly to make sure that officers are available for when we come in and to do our work, and actually then very proactively updating the schedule and the profiling of the plan, for example. We are also looking at amending how we do follow-up of recommendations, because obviously that is a concern that if officers are pressed for time, then is getting that assurance around getting the full circle around the audits, because the whole point of doing the an audit recommendation is that it is implemented timely. So rather than just doing the traditional follow-up that we've been doing on limited assurances, we're actually setting up a new system where we and process where we send out questionnaires, and we're starting to sample check and actually identifying any areas that are not necessarily doing the implementation within the appropriate timeframes. So it's very much a work in progress. Obviously, some areas are not as affected as others, but we are working with the directorates. At the minute, we haven't identified any issues, so which is a good thing. But actually, we're doing it on a risk basis as well. So we are amending and adjusting how we approach, obviously with a change in organisation, but yes, we are implementing new aspects, if that helps, Linda.
It does, thank you, Louise. And do you have a recourse for if your efforts aren't being responded to, if you're still not getting those that buy-in from departments? Do you have an escalation process to?
Yes, we do.
Ensure that you've got the support that you need to do the job that you need to do.
Exactly. So obviously there's the hierarchy of the organisation, but ultimately, if we were still struggling, then I'd report it to members and the committee.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Linda. Any further questions from members? I can't see any hands.
Well, Chair, do you want me to have to make my comments on it? We can't find the missing appendix.
I think the email was sent on Monday, John, because I've definitely got it. So
well, I'm sure it was sent out, but you don't necessarily read your emails in order. And,
no. Of course. Go on, John.
No, okay. Well, I mean, I am, as you say, slightly concerned by not having the appendix, and it just makes it more difficult. But I do have great concerns about thinking outside the box. That it seems to me that when we do audit things in Leeds, we do a very conventional audit and we know exactly where the money's gone, and that aspect of auditing works really well. What I think not completely satisfied is the issues raised, I think, recently by SIPFA as to whether there are other questions that auditors should ask out with the normal range of questioning, and whether that would result in better administration. And I must say, I'm some sympathy with the SIPFA point of view, that there may be scope for improving the audit function by doing more of it, basically, and looking at scenarios differing from the path that we've followed. No, that's really a summary of what I think. I think that it's not anybody's fault. I hate anybody to think I was blaming them for this, but when I look at standing back from it, I feel that the audit is kind of good but incomplete, and that we will benefit from that, from addressing that.
Okay, thank you, John. Your comments will be taken on board.
Okay, thank you.
Victoria, I can see Victoria's hand up.
Thank you. I'd just like to come back on that. I would say that we've got a very modern internal audit function led by Louise Booth. We've got a different way of working at Leeds, so we now get involved in all the transformation work that's been undertaken by the council. The team are involved right at the beginning, and their comments, making sure that we're doing things in the right way, governance, etc., internal controls, everything is in place at the beginning, so that they don't come and audit after we've already implemented the systems, which is a completely different way to how a previous internal audit function would have done. I would also say that they are really proactive in the work and how it's undertaken. So it isn't a traditional audit function. They do obviously have to do the audit plan and do the audit coverage, etc. But I think I can give the assurance to the committee that they do ask those challenging questions. They don't just follow an audit, a set of questions. They make sure that they cover everything in the audit, but they are very challenging. And I think if you see the number of different bodies they're on and all the different boards that they're on, you'll realise that they're in at the beginning, and they are part of that as the council starts to transform and changes. So I would like to give you that assurance, Councillor Illingworth, that they are, and they're not the traditional internal audit team. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Victoria. We've got Louise Booth, and then Duncan wants to come back in again.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Victoria, for that. But also, I'd like to say as well, you will have noticed that the update reports that we are bringing have changed recently. And to back up what Victoria said, we're actually bringing some of that information through to you in these new update reports. So whilst we have the traditional assurance opinion references within the update reports, we've now created a new section around the other audit work, which are all these bodies and boards that we're actually providing this added value work, Councillor Illingworth. So that is where it's the messaging and the outcomes and the activity is being highlighted to you as members. So if you want to give us any feedback on how that's coming through in the update reports, I'm more than happy to take that away if that's not as clear as you'd like, but that is where all the challenging questions are being asked and the outcomes recorded.
Okay, I think best pursue this outside this meeting. I'm happy to do what you suggest, and I'd like to see the paperwork and make some suggestions.
Duncan, would you like to come back in?
Yeah, just briefly. I actually think it's a really valid question and probably one of the most important questions to ask, which is obviously, are you auditing the right things? And effectively, how are you building your audit plan, and are you missing anything? And just to confirm, we had no concerns at all over the way that audit plans developed. So I could reassure you on that. I like to think that between Gillian and myself, we've seen a huge number of different audit plans and different types of organisations in different sectors, given our different experiences. And I would say that, as has been outlined, Leeds is pretty forward thinking in the way they're developing the audit plan and the types of things they look at. Of course, a key part of the audit planning process is the risk assessment side of things, and where does the key risk lie for an organisation, and often that will be in the same area year to year. But you're absolutely right. It needs to be dynamic. It needs to be mindful of changing environments and new risks as they emerge, and we can see that happening, both in terms of annual planning, but also in-year changes to the audit plan as well. So I reassure you, we don't have any concerns on that. But I suppose the committee obviously has an opportunity when it looks at the audit plan as well to scrutinise it and challenge if there's any areas that are missing.
Thank you, Duncan. Any further question from any members? No? Well, can I thank Duncan and Gillian again for their work, and on behalf of the committee, can I wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year? So thank you both. If you'd like to stay, you're most welcome. If you'd like to disappear now, and thank you again.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Have a good holiday. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Does the committee agree the recommendations set out on page 5 of the agenda pack, which is to receive the Leeds City Council Public Sector Internal Audit Standards, external quality assessment undertaken by Glasgow City Council, note the contents of the report and the confirmation that Leeds City Council Internal Audit Service conforms with the requirements of the PSIAS. Thank you. Item 4, and I would like, I invite Tim to present the report, please. Thank you, Tim.
Good afternoon, everybody. My colleague Emma Camillo-Price is going to talk you through the report, and then Emma and myself will be happy to answer questions on it.
Thanks, Tim, and thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. So this is the annual risk assurance report, which covers the Council's risk management arrangements. And whilst these are broadly the same as we've reported in previous years, there are a few key points to note, so I'll just go through those first of all. The risk management policy and strategy were reviewed this year, and the updated version was endorsed by Exec Board on the 21st of July, prior to being publicised through Insight, and the risk management toolkit on Insight has also been updated as part of this work. Changes have included some updated terminology, some key areas that were not fully reflected in the old version, such as democratic oversight. And in reviewing this report, it also allowed us to take a comparison between the policies and strategies used by other core cities, and in looking at those, we found some were very short, some were very long. What we've aimed to do with ours is to strike a bit of a balance there. The report also covers the standing corporate risks and their updated ownership details. They're outlined at point 19. Now, as well as the standing corporate risks, there's 4 additional risks currently rated as red. Those ones are coronavirus, economic growth, cyber risk and major flooding. The coronavirus risk is remaining on the register, and the details continue to be incorporated into the response and recovery plan, which is reported to the Executive Board. Now, prior to the coronavirus outbreak, the risk of pandemic was part of the major incident in the city risk, and currently a specific risk on infectious disease is being worked up with public health. Point 27 notes that a partnership governance and risk checklist has been developed for use by council services. And that's to help ensure that potential risks are covered during discussions about working with partner organisations. It's something that's been discussed at directorate management teams, and it and the guidance on how to use it are available on Insight. And further work now needs to be undertaken over the coming year on promoting that checklist and making sure that we embed it in all the work the council carries out with partner organisations. We've continued to offer risk training and workshops online throughout the pandemic, and there's a couple of examples mentioned in the report there. We're currently working with the corporate procurement unit to help develop their service level risk register, and we will be having a big push on risk refresher training in 2022, and obviously incorporating the updated risk management policy and strategy as part of that. In fact, we're delivering a session to this committee in mid-January. Earlier this year, the Intelligence and Policy Service did undertake a review comparing the risks on the Council's corporate risk register to those of other UK core cities. And that review was useful in confirming the similar nature of the corporate risks on the registers, but also identifying some differences in the way similar risks are described across the different core cities. Finally, I'd just like to mention that work is now underway, as you're probably aware, to replace the Best Council plan with a more externally facing and partnership focused Best City Ambition from February 2022. Executive Board agreed the City Ambition in principle at their meeting on 20th of October, and they are receiving an update report this month as well. This is going to require a review of the corporate risks to ensure that they are aligned to the new ambition. And we will particularly be looking at risks around partnership, which ties in with the work on the checklist that I've already mentioned. So those are the key points I wanted to raise, and happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Emma. Do we have any questions from members? Paul?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm slightly thrown by the reference to the change from the Best Council plan to the Best City Ambition, but I think that comes up later as well, doesn't it? But the 2 questions I've got on this actual report, and I'll give the paragraph numbers because obviously the page numbers I think have changed slightly. So page 31, it talks about the IPS currently working with colleagues in the Council's corporate procurement unit, advising them how to develop a risk register for their service. I must say, I saw that with some surprise, because I would have thought that this is a key area where we would perhaps legitimately have expected there to already have been a risk register. Or is it because the assumption is that the risk in terms of procurement rests with the actual procuring department, the one that negotiates the contract? And my second question, my second point, relates to paragraph 64, and it's the bar charts indicating the overall responses to the questionnaire that went out on risk management. And I have to say, I was a bit concerned about the responses relating to children and families, because in all three of the bar charts, sorry, there are more than three, aren't there? But in the first three bar charts, the numbers relating to somewhat, not at all, and don't know outweighed those who were very much aware. And I just wonder if that's an indication of some issues, because obviously children and families is an area where there are a great many risks, and one would hope that staff working there, especially at senior management level, are more than aware of them, and that even those working at the sharp end are able to identify them and feed them up if necessary. So that kind of rings some alarm bells in my head, but maybe I'm just overreacting. Thank you, Chair.
I'm happy to answer those questions, Chair.
Could you just tell us the paragraph numbers again, please?
Paragraph 31, paragraph 64.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. In terms of the work that we're doing with the procurement units, this has stemmed from a review that was done on an external review that was done on the procurement unit, and they identified that their risks needed updating. So this is like service level risk. So these sit, you've got the corporate risks at the top, directorate risks underneath, and then the service risks are the ones that relate to the service. And so the review was for the corporate procurement unit to update their service risks. And we did some work with them on this several years ago to identify what those risks were. And obviously there's no surprise around things like compliance with legal duties, etc. In fact, two of their risks have made it onto the directorate risk register, one of which is failing to follow proper procedures when you're procuring goods and services, and the other one is contract management and major supplier failure. So those risks go to an appropriate level, but underneath them there's a whole load of more granular risks, and that's what that work relates to. So I'm working with the procurement unit to help them flesh out those risks and get an updated service level risk register. But rest assured, Councillor Trustwell, when we go to resources leadership team every quarter with the directorate level risk register, there are two very big procurement risks that are on that register, and the leadership team has the opportunity to comment on those risks. Moving on to point 64 about the bar charts and the survey of internal control. Fully appreciate the comment around children's and families. And obviously they've got three risks on the corporate register, one of which is safeguarding children, which gets reviewed every quarter. And a detailed assurance report goes to Executive Board every year as part of the annual corporate risk report. But one thing that differs with children and families is that I attend all the other directorate management teams to talk to them about risks. And in children and families, a member of the Children and Families Intelligence and Policy Service tables that report and attends the meeting. And I think one of the concerns that we've identified this year is that the risk tends to get put way back in the report behind the performance information, because we report performance and risk together at children and families. And so one of the things that we did last month, or earlier this month, should I say, was that we produced a joint risk, business continuity and emergency planning report that went to children and families. And it really sort of took the risk out of the performance report and sort of gave it the prominence that perhaps it didn't get. And that report was met really, really well. Children and Families leadership team have asked us to come in and do 2 sessions with them early next year. One is around reviewing their risks, because the senior leadership team in more detail, because they've had a lot of new members of leadership team join. There's been some changes in chief officers, but also they've asked us to do some work with them, as all the other directorates have, on the cyber risk. So my getting my face in front of their leadership team will hopefully pay off. And as I mentioned in the report, I'm hoping that the results next year will show an improvement on ones this year, not just because of that, but also because we've launched the risk management policy and strategy, or updated it this time. given it a lot of publicity. And so these results were pre-publicity, if you like. So already we're starting to see, hopefully, the benefits of that pay off. But it's a very good question to ask. I'm hoping that we'll be working towards improving those results in that directorate over this year.
Paul, do you have any supplementary?
Yeah, could I just come back on that? Tim, are there any other parts of the council, and this is in reference to my first question regarding procurement, are there any other departments where, as members, we might have anticipated they already had the risk register that you're aware of and that maybe needs further action on your part or on the part of management? And my second question relates back to children and families. I'm just wondering if there's an argument, and dismiss it if you feel necessary, to revisit the work that you've been doing with them and to conduct the survey slightly earlier than a year's time.
Good questions there. So in answer to the first one, Councillor Trustwell, there's something like 90 odd services in the council, and we sort of prioritise, or we pick out key services to do a bit more work with. So, for example, we go to HR every quarter with their service risk registers. We've recently started going to financial management, as Victoria will testify, with their service register. If we were to try and do all 90, we simply don't have the resources for that. But what we do try and do is work out the ones where we're needed. And obviously the procurement service register that got picked up there. So we do offer to go do workshops on different areas of the council, and key for us is actually promoting the ability to do those workshops. But we also do horizon scanning. So if we've got a particular concern about a service area, we could approach the service to do a risk workshop. But as I say, we do have to balance out the resources and the time required on this. In terms of the children and families survey results, Kate might be able to shed more light on when the next survey is due. What we could do in the interim is, when we do the 2 review sessions with children and families leadership team, we could do a post-review survey to get the feedback as to how well the sessions have got. And that could provide some sort of proxy results until the next survey internal control is done. And in fact, when we do the training with the audit committee, we'll be letting you test our brand new feedback form, so you can see, you can give us a thorough going over as to how effective that form is. But that might be an interim solution there, Councillor Trustwell.
Is that all right, Paul?
So does Kate want to chip in as Tim?
I can't find my hand. I'll have to get lessons from Linda in a short while. In terms of the survey of internal control, that's the whole big survey that we did to help underpin the annual governance statement and the assurances that we got around that last year. We ran it for the first time last year, and on the basis of that, we're changing and tweaking the approach. It's going to have to be streamlined in order to improve the response rate, or to maintain the response rate that we got. But the plan is to do it slightly earlier in the year, so that we're able to get the results back from the survey of internal control and then send those results on with a questionnaire to those like Tim who've got specialist oversight, to be able to say, do these results chime with what you know of the control environment within the council, and what you're going to do about it if not? Or if they do chime and there are concerns, what are you going to do? What's the next steps? How do we continuously improve? So there will be results slightly earlier, but they'll feed into that annual governance cycle coming round. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. It's going to be sooner rather than later, but obviously, yeah, I think you're addressing.
But not breakneck speed, I think, is the answer.
No, but not a breakneck speed. Okay, yeah, thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Linda's been waiting patiently. Linda?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question from me, Tim and Emma, if you don't mind. On page 32 and start again, Linda. Paragraph 27, page 32, and paragraph 67, page 41, both refer to the partnership governance and risk checklist that you mentioned earlier. Unfortunately for me, I don't have access to the Insight site, so I can't see that. My question is a simple one, really, that you hopefully can answer. Within that checklist and within the questions and considerations that you have around partnership arrangements, do you explore how you get assurance over the other side, if you like? So, you know, the risks that the partnership's holding, is there some correlation, some kind of check to make sure that you're not missing any of the risks that your partner might have on theirs that could equally apply to yours? And I'm sorry, I feel like I'm diving into a bit of detail here, but I just can't see the checklist, so I can't see. Unless you want to send me a copy of the checklist, I don't mind. But maybe you can just answer that question yourself. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm happy to send you a copy of the checklist, Linda. In terms of looking at it from the partner side, actually the checklist was more of a focus from our side. How do we know the partner is who they say they are? In terms of how do we get assurance from their side? Not entirely sure without doing an audit on the partnership. So that's maybe an area that we could perhaps look at, particularly as we're going to be doing more partnership working as part of the Best City Ambition work. So that will give us an opportunity not only to continue promoting the checklist, but also maybe to make any updates that we need to. So I'll make a note of that. But in the meantime, Linda, I'll send you a copy of the checklist.
Thank you.
Kate, I don't know if you've got anything that you want to add on to that, because from a governance point of view.
Clicking on the wrong microphone. I don't think I've got anything to add particularly, but it would be obviously very helpful to have any other comments that you may have when you get your hands on the checklist.
Absolutely
any comments
fine.
that you may have. We'll circulate it to all members so that you've all seen it and can comment accordingly.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda. Councillor Illingworth.
Yeah. Yes, Chair. Just reading the report, and curiously, paragraph 4 on page 22 about external facing risks, and it lists a number of events like major flooding. I must say, without having read paragraph 4, I'd have made that list as myself as areas which might benefit from a closer look, where the assessment wasn't as good as I would have liked to have seen, and where I think there might be scope for significant cost savings and or improved performance. I don't want to introduce specific things at this stage because obviously we're in the middle of quite a large report, but I don't think everything in the garden is rosy here. I think there are problems, particularly with the areas listed in paragraph 4, and well, we could do better.
That's right. Those are our resilience risks, Councillor, and those risks face all local authorities. So we're talking here around, like, say, the cyber attacks, adverse weather, high-profile safeguarding, and the mere fact that we're a local authority means that we've got responsibility for dealing with those risks. And like I say, the risks are reviewed and updated by the respective directorates every quarter. And then when it comes to the annual risk report, we do a more detailed assurance report saying, this is what the risks are, this is what we're doing about them, this is what more we need to do. And obviously some of the risks are ones that will always face us, particularly things around climate change at the moment. So appreciate your concern there, but the main thing is that we flagged these risks up. We've compared to other UK core cities as part of the review that we did earlier this year, and similar risks are on their registers too.
Yeah.
That's it, and it's how do we deal with them, and how do we make the best use of our resources in dealing with those risks.
Yes, I think there's some particular problems with biodiversity, for example, which I don't think has been adequately assessed, and we're doing not as well as we think we are.
Yeah, and I'm quite happy to meet with you, Councillor, to talk about that risk, and you know, we can have a chat about that, and if we do need to create a new risk at whatever level within the council, quite happy to do that, Councillor.
Well, that would be good. That would be good. Thank you.
Any more questions from members? Councillor Foster?
Yeah, just a quick one, Tim, and I think you did touch on it, but I didn't quite catch it all. I see in the report you talk about the quarterly reviews for the areas of risk, but you also then mentioned a little bit about horizon scanning, looking for new problems coming our way. So I just wanted to touch base with you. Do you feel you have the resources with all the day-to-day tasks that you have, that you've got sufficient resource for somebody to be stood on the bridge with the binoculars looking for the iceberg?
That's a good question, and we don't just rely ourselves through the horizon scanning. We've got an extensive network of risk contacts across the council, some of whom are in this meeting today. The horizon scanning that we do is a mix of talking to people, looking through the news reports, seeing things that have happened elsewhere and asking, could they happen to us? But also I'm a member of professional bodies that do this sort of thing as well. But there's always that risk, as Donald Rumsfeld called it,
no.
That's the one, yes.
Yes.
very famous report. So generally, I feel we've got a good set of binoculars, but you can never say never, because there's always things that we've seen elsewhere catch people out. And as I mentioned in the report, the central team has been subject to some reductions this year. And what's that meant is smarter working, working in collaboration with colleagues across the council and not doing everything ourselves. But we do ask the question when we go to each directorate management team every quarter, is there anything you want to raise that you're concerned about that isn't already picked up on the risk register? And I'm quite happy for councillors to do that as well. And in the report we mention, it's one of the things that we ask when we go to executive board as well. And any councillor on this meeting is more than welcome, as Councillor Illingworth has just done, to raise any potential new risks with us.
Councillor Foster, would you like to come back? Is that all right?
Yeah, no, that's a great answer, Tim. Thanks for that.
Any further questions? Councillor Illingworth, if you take down your hand, please. Does the committee agree the recommendations are set out on page 23 of the agenda pack, which is to receive the annual report on the council's corporate risk management arrangements and note the assurances in support of their next annual governance statement? We'll go to item 5. It's the annual assurance report on business continuity management, and it's Tim again. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Councillor. So business continuity management is a similar discipline to risk. And a year ago, when one of my predecessors left the council on the early leavers scheme, I was given responsibility for business continuity management, and it made sense because it's very closely linked to risk management. In fact, many of the textbooks on risk cover business continuity management. It's been an incredibly busy year for business continuity. I've spent an awful lot of time on this. The report points out that one of the major things that we did was start to review the arrangements, and we got buy-in from corporate leadership team to go around all the directorate management teams and do a specific report to them on business continuity and emergency planning arrangements. And that report goes at the same time as our risk and performance report. And it's been very engaging to get around all those leadership teams to talk to them about this area. Earlier in the year, we were posed a question by a chief executive. The business continuity plans, of which we had around 80, are those plans academic or are they agile? In other words, do they say all the right things and have all the right boxes ticked, but actually are they not very usable in the event of a business continuity incident? And having looked through all 80 odd plans, I have to accept there was quite a lot of unnecessary bureaucracy in some of those plans. And so we've produced a more streamlined and hopefully easier to use version. And some of the key areas that we've kind of moved out of the plan were things like a lot of unnecessary historic version control that was right up front in the plan at the expense of the really key stuff like the key contacts and the phone numbers. A lot of the plans were over 30 pages long, and a lot of that was down to the fact that they had lots of detailed instructions. Well, actually, a business continuity plan should be intuitive to use. And so what I did was I moved the instructions into a separate standalone document that makes the business continuity plans a bit more focused to use. And the advantage of that is if any guidance changes on how to produce a business continuity plan, I only have to update the central instructions document and not 82 plans. We've also worked closely with the Resilience and Emergencies team to develop a central site on SharePoint where all the business continuity plans can be stored. And that's particularly important because anecdotally, a few times during the year when I've asked people to update their plans, a number of people have come back and said, oh, can you send me a copy of the latest version? Well, that's an alarm bell ringer because they should have the copies to hand. So the development of this central site that houses the incident response plans and the business continuity plans has been a big success, and we've tested that site and we're rolling it out now across all the business continuity plans. And just in case the council systems go down and we can't recover the site, we're backing up all those plans onto Resilience Direct, which is an externally hosted site. So if all our computers go down, we can get access to that from our home computers. Other notable things to point out from the report is that we've been reviewing the criticality of the business continuity plans. I think the pandemic has made us realise that some of the things we thought were critical aren't really. And so also the scope of some of the plans has needed to change. So for example, some of the ones in finance, we've realised that the scope needed to be expanded to cover things like the revenue collection, which is really important. As well as this, we also monitor how up to date the plans are, and each business continuity plan has to be reviewed and updated every single year. And it's a constantly moving feast, as you can imagine. And every time I go to a directorate management team or a service management team, somebody comes up with a suggestion for a new plan or a revision to an existing plan. So as it stands, the scores on the doors, we have 78 critical plans, of which 7 of those are work in progress. So the plans that are currently being developed, new plans or existing plans that are being merged. And there are 13 plans which have a due date by the end of December. Should any of those plans not get updated, then when we next go to the directorate management teams in February, we can obviously raise that, and that will add impetus to getting the plans up to date. But we also have to be aware that these plans relate to critical services, and there's a lot of pressure on staff to deliver those frontline services, and this is an administrative piece of work that adds extra pressure onto them. So again, there's been a couple of times this year when I've contacted people to update their plans, and you can tell from their response that they're under a lot of pressure. So we have to balance out, the pressure that staff are under versus getting all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. And again, this is where going to the directorate management teams can help, because they might be able to pull extra resources in to help out if needs be. Cyber remains a massive business continuity threat, and we've done an awful lot of work on cyber, with an awful lot more to come next year, going around every single one of the directorate management leadership forums to deliver some cyber exercises. And also we attended in September Exercise Emmet, which was a regional cyber theoretical desktop exercise. And the learning from that is being cascaded down into directorates and their business continuity plans. Last but not least, there's an awful lot of work in progress. We're by no means where we want to be with some of these areas. So we've got the rest of the new templates to roll out. There's a lot more work to do on cyber. One of the things that we need to do is test these new plans, because until a plan has been properly tested, you might never know whether it would work or not. So if I thought 2021 was busy, that's nothing compared to what 2022 is going to be like. So I'm now going to take a pause, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have on business continuity arrangements.
Thank you, Tim. Councillor Illingworth.
So there we go. I think you're absolutely right to focus on cyber. I think it's a really worrying area where you can't be certain you've thought of everything inevitably. Looking at the structure for Microsoft 365, for example, it would fill me full of horror to think of its scope for subversion, malfunction. Not at all convinced by the philosophy that's gone into that, and it seems to have built in its synchronization tendencies a fine way to propagate malware across the authority. Well, I just don't envy you. It's not an easy job at all. We've seen what disruption a relatively minor virus infection can cause. We haven't seen the full repertoire from the virus kingdom by any stretch yet. You wonder what would happen if we had an outbreak of temperate climate Ebola, for example, in major cities. It wouldn't be easy to cope with, and business continuity would become very difficult after that.
That's right, and like you say, cyber it's a constantly changing situation, and the cyber viruses are getting more and more sophisticated, and that's why we work quite closely with colleagues in IDS on this. And there's a lot of work planned for 2022 in terms of updating their business continuity plans, re-looking at the order which we would recover systems if the whole network went down, double checking what would each of these business continuity plans do if the council system became unavailable. But at the same time, we also recognise that we are heavily reliant, like a lot of local authorities are, on our systems. And so the emphasis here is on prevention rather than cure. So part of this work will be communications to council staff, things like not clicking on suspicious emails, etc. And also colleagues in IDS have started to produce something called Cyber Sentinel, which is a newsletter that goes out to senior staff. And we're talking about perhaps expanding the comms around that to cover all staff, not just those at a senior level. So it's a constantly evolving threat, and we really need to be on top of this. You're quite right.
Councillor Illingworth, would you like to come back? You're on mute.
Yes, I was just in process of taking my hand down, because I think there's a measure of agreement here. It's a difficult problem, a serious threat, and we have to try as hard as we can.
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth. Linda?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, good to hear that you've spent some time focusing on the criticality of processes and areas that require attention most or first, if you like. Linked to that is the what I always call the hill risks, the high impact, low likelihood risks, those risks that come and bite us on the bum very, very rarely, like a pandemic, for example. And I can see that you say, you've learned some lessons, or there's been a lessons learned exercise taking place on the back of that. In your consideration of the critical areas and reviews of BCP, business continuity plans, across the council, do you take account of those areas where there is a high impact, low likelihood risk, or where there's a risk that's got a particularly fast speed of onset, for example? Do you look at those first, or do you look at those in a different way?
That's a good question, Linda. When the criticality of the plans was determined a number of years ago, something called a business impact analysis was done, and that was where information was fed in and the criticality of the plan was determined. The focus this year has been, like say, on reviewing what are the critical services. But you're quite right. I think there's more to do in terms of aligning the plans with the risks as well. And like you say, you get these, the sort of the high impact, low likelihood ones. And as part of that annual review, I think actually we could do more in terms of reflecting the risks around that as well. That's a good point. And this is a sort of feedback that I've been quite keen to get from the plan owners when we rolled out this new streamlined plan. And we know quite easily that most of these plans link to those main risks on major incident in the city and major incident in the council. But there's different aspects of those risks. For example, the flooding side, where we could have prolonged rain over Christmas like we did a couple of years ago. Has that been fully reflected in the plans? And again, the annual review represents the opportunity to sort of double check on that. But that's a good point, Linda.
And I think linked to that, Tim, is the those risks that might not be high impact, low likelihood. You know, there might be fairly common risks that occur often, but it's when they occur fast. You know, when they come in, sweep us up, you know, very quickly. We need to be in a position to respond to those in a much faster way. So I think business continuity plans need to reflect and consider those quite overtly. But it sounds like you're on that journey by the sounds of it. But I'd be keen to hear how it progresses, if that's okay.
Yes, that's a good point. And a good example of that, Linda, was this time last year we lost 125 staff on ELI at very, very short notice. And even though the business continuity plans had a staffing shortage in them, I don't think anybody could have predicted that high level of senior staff leaving at that point in time. And so one of the things that I did this time was, as part of the new template, was actually specifically said what would happen if, you know, key staff left, and are there any single points of failure there? So this is where the format of the plan is reactive. Yeah, but I'm quite happy next year, if not sooner, to sort of feedback on that, Linda.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Truswell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I had two questions. The first has been largely covered by Linda's question and subsequent responses. My second one really just reprises an observation that I made in respect of the previous report and the survey returns. But on this occasion, it seems to be City Development who are the, I'm trying to think of a term that's not pejorative, the lowest scorers on the doors. And I just wondered, Tim, whether there's any overall theme or picture behind that, and anything that you've picked up that actually needs addressing. And I asked that question not just as a member of this committee, but as the chair of the relevant scrutiny board, whose remit largely covers city development.
And again, that's a good question, and I'm quite surprised at the City Dev responses, because their Directorate Resilience Group has met frequently, at least a quarter, if not more frequent, during the past year that I've been part of business continuity. Having go to those meetings, I know that they're thoroughly all over business continuity and risk management as well. So I'm quite surprised at how low the results were. And maybe that's something that I can pick up when I go to the next Directorate Resilience Group, which I think is in February. But certainly, when I look at city development's business continuity plans, they're always the exemplar in terms of getting them up to date fairly quickly. And again, they've signed up to the cyber review exercise. But as I've mentioned in all three reports, these results have come in prior to us doing an awful lot of work on the business continuity or the risk arrangements. And so I'm hoping, or more than hoping, that the results will increase in that area next year. And if they don't, I'd be quite surprised. Why not? But it's something that I'll flag up at the next Director Resilience Group, Councillor Truswell.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. It did come as a surprise to me, because I endorse what you've said, and we've had regular reports over the course of the last nearly 2 years around this sort of resilience. So it is a slight worry, but if the plans and if at senior level aren't being cascaded down to the sharp end of services, then that would be a worry. But maybe that's something you could possibly get back to me informally about.
Yep, will do.
Is that all right, Councillor Truswell?
That's fine, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Foster?
Yeah, Tim, just a quick one. How far down the team structures are these continuity plans briefed to the teams? Is there a training package and a verification package that goes with it?
That's right. So these plans tend to be, the key contacts of the plans tend to be operational staff who deal with the day-to-day admin of the business continuity plan. And each plan has an owner, which is usually somebody at a senior level. And this year, as I've been reviewing the plans, I've noticed a little bit of inconsistency between who owns the plans. In some directorates or services, it's somebody senior like a head of service or chief officer. In other plans, it's been the administrative person is the owner as well as the key contact. So one of the things that we've done this year is to differentiate between the two and make sure there's two different people there. But also, as we've been going around the directorate management teams, talking to them about business continuity, and particularly when we've been doing the training recently on the new site, we've been promoting the ownership of plans. As I mentioned earlier on, until you actually test a plan, you'll never know how well it works. And certainly the testing program is definitely in need of an overhaul. I've been doing a lot of research this week around what sort of types of tests you can do, because there are different types. And so now we've got the new templates and with the new site, next year is the ideal time to do this testing once the plans have been updated and these new roles and responsibilities embedded, because again, this time last year, an awful lot of people with business continuity responsibility left on ELI. So you're quite right, and the testing program is one that I'm quite happy to report back on next year. And as well as that, we mentioned in the previous conversation on the risk report about feedback surveys, and that's something that I'm quite keen to build into the test, because you need to know what works well, what people think of the scenario testing. So that's something that I'm looking to adopt as part of that testing next year, Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, I've seen it myself in the past, but you know, when the emergency process says, you know, start up the standby generator, and the standby generator hasn't been serviced for 5 years and there's no diesel in it. But it's just, you know, if Merion House burnt down on Sunday night, would you have a few hundred people stood out the front wondering what to do? Or, you know, how many of those people would know what the process was?
That's a good point. And in fact, you might recall earlier this year, Merion House flooded and was closed for a week or two. Unfortunately, because we were all working at home because of the pandemic restrictions, and because those new working arrangements have been in place for a time, that was one definite big tick, because people were either able to carry on working at home or there were space available in the civic hall. But like you say, what if there's the generator that doesn't work anymore? And so like we know, the best thing to do is to test these plans properly. And part of the work I'll be doing next year is prioritising them for testing. In fact, a number of plan owners have come back, and we've started to schedule some of those tests in for early next year.
Is that all right, Councillor Foster?
Yeah, it's great. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you. Any further questions from members? No. Does the committee agree the recommendations set out on page 43 of the agenda pack, which requests the committee to consider this report and the assurances provided within it and the attached Appendix 1, accepting that the business continuity arrangements are fit for purpose, up to date, are routinely complied with, have been effectively communicated and are monitored? Thank you. We'll go to it's agenda item 11. It's the annual assurance report on performance management, and it's Tim again.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the third report that we have today from my team, and this is on the performance management arrangements. Arrangements have been largely unchanged over the past year. We still have the Best Council Plan, which is supported by 80 key performance indicators that show how on track we are achieving our Best Council Plan priorities. As we mentioned last year, some of those key performance indicators we've just not been able to get results from, particularly some of those in the education sector, because they're simply not available because of the impact of the pandemic. Other performance indicators show how on track we are or were in bouncing back from the impacts of the pandemic, particularly those around the economy and culture. We still update and report the key performance indicators to the respective directorate management teams and corporate leadership team 4 times per year. We report the performance indicators twice a year to respective scrutiny boards. And I'm sure as Councillor Truswell will testify, when we go to the Infrastructure Investment and Inclusive Growth Scrutiny Board, those key performance indicators get a thorough going over.
Together with the officers.
That's it. And the good thing about that is that the officers responsible for the performance indicators in the directorates front up those indicators in the report at the respective scrutiny board meeting, so they're quite clearly held to account. When the indicators are discussed at the respective management teams and leadership team, I think there's an air of constructivity around this. There isn't really a blame culture from what I've seen for the meetings that I've attended. There's that sort of constructive discussion around the indicators, which means that people are more likely to sort of flag up what their concerns are, what they're doing about it. And that also applies for risk management too. We do our annual report on the performance indicators to Executive Board, and that went back in July. As I mentioned in the report, the main focus is that we're moving next year to a best city ambition, which is that more external facing ambition. And that's going to mean not only are we going to have to relook at all our corporate risks, but also the key performance indicators too, because we want to make sure that we're going to be measuring the right things. And so there's work underway on what we're going to report, how we're going to report it. We'll be looking again at the key performance indicators. There's a lot of consultation going on this at the moment, and so that really is the big focus over the next few months, is how we're going to adapt the performance arrangements around this new plan. So again, I'm going to pause there a moment, and I'm quite happy to answer questions on the performance report.
Thank you, Tim. We've got a question from Councillor Truswell.
Thanks, Chair. It probably is too early in the process for you to be able to answer this question definitively, Tim, but how great a change to KPIs do you anticipate, given the fact that we're going to be measuring things that aren't just issues? Well, at the moment, not all KPIs relate purely to issues within the council's remit and control, but how fundamental is that likely to be? And my second question is there a consultation process about this, these changes to the approach to what was the Better Council Plan, what is now the Better City Ambition, I think it's going to be called, isn't it? And will that include this committee and scrutiny as part of that formal consultation process? And what's the timescale for that?
Right. So in answer to the first question, Councillor Truswell, be pleased to know that we'll be keeping those internal facing performance indicators that are really important to show how well the council itself is doing. There may be one or two changes. Each time that we look at this, there are some that we know work well that we'll never get rid of. There are other ones that we know perhaps sounded good in theory, but when you come to try and apply them, you know, they're less successful because sometimes you just can't get the information you thought you could get. But that sort of hardcore of internal facing indicators will by and large be there. The external ones are more interesting ones to look at, because some of those we've got less of a direct influence over. So our old friend, you know, the killed and seriously injured stats that I know you're particularly keen on looking at. You know, we've got less of an influence on those than we do with some of the internal ones. But again, I think all the big ones will still be there. But we're looking at how frequently we might report them. Are they better placed in a sort of a best city report, along with some wider indicators from partner organisations? So it's still at a very, very early stage. In terms of the consultation, I know we've been doing the internal consultation, and I will find out from colleagues who are leading on this what the plans are for Audit Committee and Scrutiny Board. So I'll email them this afternoon about that, Councillor Truswell.
Councillor Truswell, do you want to come back?
No, thanks, Tim. Thanks, Chair.
Kate?
Chair, if it assists, I've just quickly pulled up the exec board papers from yesterday's meeting, Wednesday's meeting, and I note that the second of the recommendations on the Best Council Ambition report was to refer the Best City Ambition initial proposals to scrutiny for their consideration. So it's definitely heading your way, assuming that those recommendations were approved yesterday.
There you go, Councillor Truswell.
Okay.
Any further questions? Councillor Foster?
Yeah, Tim, I think I've actually been searching for you for the last 6 months, and I've finally found you. Because you've just covered a lot of things that are very dear to my heart, KBIs, and I'm very interested in the way that they impact on resources going into certain communities. You know, my general feeling is that the way that we use KBIs just means the same money keeps going into the same areas, to the detriment of others. How, I mean, first off, I believe there's going to be a vote early next year on the Best City Ambition at full council meeting. I'm assuming everything will have been completed by then, including all the KBIs that are going to be used before we're asked to vote on it. Is that right?
I will have to find out for that, because I know the approval is going to be sort of February, March time. And in previous Best Council plans or anything to go by, sometimes there's a period of adjustment. But I'll find out more about that in January, because we've got some meetings scheduled in on this. What we do know is that there's the ability to update and amend KPIs in a year if we think that some of the existing ones don't work, or if there's ones that we feel we should be reporting on but we're not. So just because the Best City Ambition might get approved, it doesn't mean to say that the KPIs are locked down at that point. There is a flexibility around that. But again, I'll find out and come back to you on that, if that's all right.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I'm heavily focused in this inclusive growth agenda that Leeds City Council keep telling us, which I believe is still a big part of the Best City Ambition. And obviously, if I'm asked to vote on it, I need to be happy that inclusive growth is a working element of that plan. So you couldn't see me voting for anything that couldn't convince me that that was the case.
That's a good point, and I'm aware that the inclusive growth strategy is it due to be reviewed and updated next year. So one possibility is that we could produce, once that inclusive growth strategy has been reviewed, the KPIs could be adapted afterwards as well. So it's about how we try and get everything done in the right order. So we wouldn't want to lock down ourselves on a series of KPIs that become out of date, and that, you know, we do draw on these main strategies: inclusive growth, health and well-being, carbon, when we do produce the key performance indicators, as well as other strategies, of which there's numerous. But I'll find out about that if I can, Councillor.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you. Any further questions from members? I can't see any hands. No? Okay. Does the committee agree the recommendations set out on page 61 of the agenda pack, which are to receive this report and the attached Appendix 1 as together, providing key forms of assurance on the robustness of the authority's corporate performance management arrangements? Thank you. We'll go to item 7. It's the internal audit update report, page 79, and I invite Jonathan to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So good afternoon, everybody. So this report provides an update on the work that we've completed between August and November this year. So as we've discussed at previous meetings, and as we actually mentioned in the Glasgow report earlier, the content of our update reports continues to evolve so that we can produce valuable information for yourselves, and in many cases address the issues that I know that you've asked for, so that you maintain the oversight of our work. So the first section that I'd like to draw your attention to here is 3.1, so that's a new section that we've got in here. So this shows significant additions and deletions that reflect our need to, I guess, be responsive to the risks and priorities that change over the year, and also demonstrate in many cases our own efforts to work smarter. So a good example of that would be the first audit in that table. So you'll see there employee outside interests. So members will recall that we commit to some annual coverage around the application of HR policies. So that's included in the audit plan that you approved in March. And we also allocate time there for proactive fraud work and for example, responding to emerging procurement risks. So we see this as a key piece of proactive fraud work. So it gives assurance that the council's embedded a culture of integrity in its decision making, and that we're aligned with the Nolan principles, which is so important in the anti-fraud culture. But we're also using the time, as well as the proactive fraud time, we're also using the time that we'd allocated towards HR policies and some time for emerging procurement risks, so that this is a really broad audit, and that the range of assurances that we can deliver from that adds some real value. So it shows that we're working smartly there in kind of merging areas of our plan and delivering an audit very effectively, rather than say 3 separate reports, which would be more time consuming. The next section to draw your attention to, and I guess this is the more familiar section for yourselves, so the table of reports issued. So as you'll see, we've issued 20 reports during this period. You'll see as well in the table that we've now started to include the assurance streams within the update report. You'll be familiar with that from the annual report and the plan. So it's a good way really of showing the diverse range of assurances that each audit provides. So it's not just one area. It shows that each audit we do provides a range of assurances across so many different areas. And building on that as well, you'll see sections 6 and 7. They include the details of the other audit work, and that's what Louise was mentioning earlier on during the Glasgow report. So it shows that we aren't just reliant on the reports that we issue. We get involved in so much different stuff that contributes to the assurances, and I think it reflects on, again, the forward-thinking nature of the team and all the range of things that we're involved in that build up that opinion over the course of the year. So under the table of reports issued, you will see there are details of the limited opinions that we've given, as well as our follow-up work and other areas of particular significance, so that you have the information around that. Another area that's new to this particular update is the graph that we've included, and I think that's in section 9. So you'll see that shows productivity against the audit plan there. So it shows the total number of days that we planned to spend in each area over the year, the total number that we expected to spend by this stage, and then the actual number of days that we've spent. So hopefully this begins to offer members some reassurance that we're broadly on plan when it comes to delivering assurances in the areas that we agreed back in March this year. So this is our first step towards providing greater information in that area for yourselves. So feedback on our performance is an area that I know you've always been very keen on, and you'll see here in the table at section 4 that we did receive a score of 1 in relation to a particular audit being undertaken efficiently. So we do always investigate where we've received a score of 2 or below. And in this particular instance, I can offer some reassurance to members that that score was attributed for reasons that were largely beyond our control, really, but that we fully appreciate at the same time. So it was a school audit that this one related to, and in undertaking that audit remotely, I think the client certainly felt that it experienced significant disruption, because obviously in a school you often only have one copier, one scanner, and they were needing to queue up at the copier and scan documents in to provide that information. But the score wasn't a reflection on the performance of the auditor or the value that we added, and in fact they actually commended the auditor in the survey that they'd returned. But we do offer to carry out these school audits in every audit in person. Obviously, things may change a little bit with the rules changing at the moment, but we always try our very best to minimise disruption. And in this instance, it just shows, unfortunately, that the client did feel that it did disrupt in a way, but it also, I feel, reinforces the integrity and objectivity of the feedback process, which I know was something we talked about at one of the last meetings. So it does show that auditees are comfortable in returning honest feedback, even where it's not favourable. And that is really crucial to us in helping to identify areas for us to improve. So on the satisfaction questionnaires, just staying on that issue for the time being, you'll see in the update report that we've also included a graph that shows the return rate by directorate. So I'd like to actually thank members for asking for this, as the benefit of that is it shone a light on the fact that the return rate is particularly lower in schools. So it's prompted us to look into that, and there are a few reasons for it. So firstly, getting feedback from schools tends to be a challenging area for audit teams nationally, and we've talked about that with some of our peers. Secondly, many of the school audits are regular audits that they pay for and that we complete on quite a frequent basis for them. So they may feel that they've already filled in feedback at another point recently, but the fact that they come back to us repeatedly shows that they are satisfied with us by default. And thirdly, and this is a pertinent point here, many of the school audits are voluntary fund audits that you'll see in the table of reports issued. So the voluntary fund audits are a narrower scope than the standard audits that we complete. And many of the questions that we're asking, or we have been asking in the standard CSQ, don't really apply to those. So we've already got on the front foot here and responded to that. So in response, we've now tailored a specific form to issue on the voluntary fund audits. So that will enable us to gather consistent and valuable feedback that aligns with the feedback that we produce for members regularly. And also, I guess it's less imposing for the schools to complete, and it focuses specifically on the areas that relate to those audits. And we have actually already received a positive return on this since this report was written. So we hope in future that this does see a bit of a steady increase in the response rate in that area. But it does show, again, I feel, the value of the committee in challenging us for that information, and shows we've been able to do something to address that straight away, really. So finally, you'll see in the quality assurance sections that we've included a reference to the recent inspections, so our ISO assessment and also the Glasgow assessment that you received the report on earlier. And we've now provided our quality assurance improvement programme that I think previously we've only tended to include this during the annual report and opinion. But now I feel it is beneficial for us to show this to you in each of the quarterly updates so that you can see the progress that we make on our service and procedural improvement tasks. And I think this reflects really well, actually, on the initiative and commitment of the whole team. So it shows all of the things that we're getting involved in to improve the way that we do things. And it also does pick up the issues that were raised in the Glasgow report that you received earlier. So it underlines that we are really committed to taking action to improve wherever we can. So that's it from me on the audit side, but you will see that as requested by members, we've also appended the further information on the monitoring of urgent decisions. So if you do have any questions or any points that you want to raise, I will be happy to try and answer those as best I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. There's a question from Councillor Almas. Councillor Almas, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sorry if I've got a dodgy connection here. Just a quick one. First of all, thank you, Jonathan, for the presentation and letting us know directorate to directorate. In terms of customer satisfaction questionnaire, would I be right in saying, in terms of getting the response back from the external auditors, was that an outstanding sort of response that we received on top of the 2 requested, or why is it 3 out of 2? And secondly, in terms of the cross-cutting, I mean, you've explained the schools and whatever you. Please forgive my ignorance. What's cross-cutting? I would like to know what does that represent? Thank you.
No problem at all, Councillor Almas. So the 3 that we've received against 2 that were issued, that reflects the time lag here. So we obviously send out our requests for feedback after every audit that's been completed, and then they can come through at different times. So 1 came through relating to the previous period that we'd asked for previously. So that's why we report 3 that we've got during the period, but we actually only asked for 2 that relate to audits completed during this period. And there'll always be a bit of a time lag there. So again, sometimes where you see that we've got no response, it doesn't mean that we definitely won't get a response. It may be that that response comes later. So it just reflects the balance of time there. And secondly, the cross-cutting one, and sorry for that terminology, I realise you wouldn't necessarily be familiar with that. That relates to grant work that we've done where you don't really align, or we haven't aligned that to a specific directorate. So it relates to, I guess, work that spans across a few areas of the council. And we do some audits as well where it isn't necessarily directorate specific. So we've classified it a bit differently there because it hasn't been aligned to a specific service area, if that makes sense.
Chair, may I just ask a follow-up, please?
Of course.
And just while we're on that graph, Jonathan, I mean, obviously the past year and a half or 2 years have been exceptional years. How do we compare with regards to school sort of feedback on questionnaires, customer services, customer satisfaction questionnaires, and other feedback with regards to families and children and schools? If we compare this last year to, say, for example, 2019 or 2018, 2019, how do we compare on that in terms of the responses that we have received on those years?
I don't have that data for you available now. I'd have to go back and have a look at that over the course of time with the schools and the children's and families response rates. I can assure you that we continue to get some very positive and constructive feedback from the schools. And as I say, after we'd actually written this report, we've already got a very favourable return from one of the schools in the new format that I mentioned. But in terms of being able to give you that comfort over their response rate over a longer period, I'd need to go back and have a look at the data for that. And that's something that I can come back to you on outside of the meeting, if that helps. And I'll share that with members, obviously.
Is that all right, Councillor Almas?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Truswell?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Councillor Almas has really asked my question. It was to confirm that if we were to go back over a longer period in terms of non-returns, whether it would still be the schools who are largely responsible for the concerns that I think we've expressed. So I think it's just seeking that reassurance that this snapshot is representative rather than just a one-off.
After the meeting, I will have a look back at the annual report, actually, because that does provide some more data from the previous year. So I will respond to that one, but we may already have the data from the annual report, and then we'll confirm that with you. But the schools thing, like I say, it has shone a bit of a light on it, that there's more that we can do in one area to try and encourage that feedback. So I feel very positive that we've got on the front foot on that one straight away.
Thank you, Jonathan. Linda?
Thank you, Chair. I've just got two quick questions, if I may. On page 89, paragraph 5.2.1, it's about the report on the no recourse to public funds. There's a line in there that says the audit provided limited assurance for compliance with the control environment as a result of issues identified with the accuracy of some payments. So again, not wanting to dive into the detail, but was that systemic or were they one-off payments? And I guess my follow-on question to that, if I may, is if you know what if it's systemic, what's being done about that? And then my second question is around the new table that you've put in section 6. And I think it's helpful to see all the additional work that internal audit's doing, and commendable that you are doing that additional stuff. I guess for me, from a receiver of assurance, I'm keen to know, I know it's not assurance, a lot of it's advisory, but some of it's providing a check, a tick against grant claims, for example. Is there anything, I noticed on the first item in that box tells us how it contributes to assurance, but also says whether it's satisfactory or not. But the rest of them don't. They just tell us how it contributes to a particular area of assurance. Is there any scope, possibility to just say whether it's a good, bad or indifferent conclusion that you've come to from the work that you've done? Because I just can't see that. I can see that you've done something, but I don't know what it's telling me. And I don't mean that to sound horrid, but if you know what I mean. They were my two areas, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely fine with that, Linda. So taking the points in turn, so no recourse to public funds, first of all. I guess the good thing here is that the errors were quite low in monetary value individually. But you're right that I'm not going to say they were systemic, but they were relatively high in frequency. And I think the root cause of this, from my understanding, and it wasn't an audit that I was involved in specifically, but I am aware that I think some of the payments need to be raised separately to the actual system that they use. So we are looking at ways of trying to automate that within the system, which would obviously eradicate that scope for human error at times there. And I know our lead in that area, our principal audit manager, sits on a project board in the Children's and Families section, looking at how they can increase automation with the system. So it is something that we are working with them on. And they were relatively small monetary value, but enough to say that there's something more that can be done there. And we are taking that forward. On the second point around the other assurance, where I think you raise a very good point there, and we have discussed, I think, separately around the data analytics work, for example, that we plan to do around Treasury, that will report it through that area. And I think giving an indication of the outcomes and some reassurance to yourselves that the work was, for example, broadly satisfactory, it is something that we can build into that section. And these are the areas where we do really welcome this sort of feedback, because it highlights, it's a new section for us, but the more information that we can provide that's useful to you and that's value adding to you, the better, really. So definitely come the next update, we will look at providing some more information around that sort of thing.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Chair.
Any more questions from members? No? Okay. Does the committee agree the recommendations set out on page 79 of the agenda pack, which is to A, receive the internal audit update report covering the period from August to November 2021, and note the work undertaken by internal audit during the period covered by the report. B, to note that there have been no limitations in scope and nothing has arisen to compromise the independence of internal audit during the reporting period. C, receive the report providing information relating to the monitoring of urgent decisions covering the period August to November 2021. Thank you. Kate, is there anything else, or that's it?
That's it. With it being a standalone meeting, there isn't the work programme for future committee meetings. So it's enjoy the festive break, I guess.
Thank you. All that remains is to remind members that the committee, the next meeting of the Corporate Governance and Audit Committee is diarised to take place in person, hopefully, at 2 p.m. on Friday, the 4th of February, 2022. So that concludes the meeting. Can I thank the officers and all the members for all their continued hard work for the meeting, for this corporate meeting, and to wish you all a very happy Christmas and a very peaceful, prosperous new year to you all.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Christmas, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Can we please switch the webcast on?